Welcome to Wines and Wonders with Kirsten Fox. True stories with a side of wine. Looking for inspiration for your life and your wine glass? This is your podcast. Here's Kirsten.
Welcome, Carolynn Bottino, to Wines and Wonders. So happy to have you here today. You guys, we are digging in this season with a lot of comforting words for you and wines as well to help us get through what is unprecedented in the world and to help uplift us as we go through our days. I am so excited to have Carolynn Bottino in the studio with me today. Well, I say in the studio because that's such a thing that I used to say. Carolynn's in San Diego.
I'm in my studio. You're in your studio.
And so we are going to work together today. We're going to be playing around with some concepts that Carolynn has been working on for a lot longer than I have. Now, Carolynn is a bookkeeper for years. She's had like 100 clients, one of whom was me for a long time and still is me. Actually, I should say that in a different role now. Carolynn's more of an overseer now. I'm more of a CFO for hire for me. And through her work with her hundreds of bookkeeping clients, she started realizing there was a need for an actual guide, an actual person that is holding space and watching over these people's money, well beyond just making sure that the negatives equal the positives and all that stuff and whatever accountants do, which is all crazy to me. How long ago was it, Carolynn, that you decided to write your book?
Probably about roughly 2.5 years ago, I got an idea to write a book. And around the same time, I also created a second business, which is called the Money Empowerment Project. And what I was seeing in my clients' lives is that they had this need to understand their numbers, not just from here's how much I made and here's the expenses I had, because our numbers go so much deeper than that. Our emotions and our history is tied up in those numbers as well. And I just started noticing that there were interesting correlations between how much money somebody had and what their relationship was to money, and they weren't what I expected. And so as I kind of unraveled some of that, I just started realizing that there was this huge need to understand money on a much different level. And I probably had been doing it for a long time with my clients. I just didn't really have the words to explain what I was doing. So it all kind of came together at once. And a lot of it was just kind of listening to what the universe was telling me about money.
Okay, so I watched you go through this experience personally as you were like, I think I'm going to write a book. And I didn't remember how long ago it was. For those of you listening or watching on YouTube, her book, it's called The Land of Plenty, A Soulpreneur's Guide to Finding Joy, Possibility, and Abundance Through Money Empowerment. That book is now an international bestseller, and it has been featured on the Spirited Woman's Top 12 book pick list for 2020. So it's very timely for all of us. And as you went through this cathartic experience, as you were being spoken to about money, I obviously read Carolynn's book from cover to cover as soon as it was available. It was extremely helpful to me. We all have money stories that we grew up with based on family, based on experiences with jobs and things bosses may have told you, teachers may have told you. And we take all this in and then we decide one way or another, either, man, I'm going to have to work hard for my money. Or parents saying, money doesn't grow on trees, and all these different things that you take in. My family story was the women don't work and the men take care of the women. And I was actually told that verbally by my mom because I came from a family where the women were cared for by the men in the old societal types of things. And so I've had to work on this for years and years of getting out of that story that I was taught, that the previous generations had taught me, and that it wasn't working for me. I had two husbands over time decide not to take care of their wife. And so, that didn't work so well in my world. And Carolyn was a part, and her book was a part of me getting to the root of why I was struggling to be a success in the world. And as soon as I literally got a hold of this issue, I have had, until a recent virus that affected the entire world, I've had a great and increasing in multiples stream of income that I never foresee that I could do myself. I was always supposed to be the support staff for a man, and I suddenly am doing it on my own. So super happy, obviously, about that. And we're going into this really hard time right now with everybody in a world of panic, as am I, I guess I won't call it panic right now, but there is a lot going on. And Carolyn sent an email to me the other day that was called Thoughts About Fear and Scarcity in a Time of Uncertainty. And as I do, I read all of Carolyn's stuff. And it just, as soon as I started reading it, it was like when your hands get dry and you get some cream and you start rubbing the cream on your hands, and it literally instantly soothes your hands. This was the way that this email affected me. And since I love Carolyn and I realized we could do these Zoom calls instead of having her in person, I decided I wanted to have her on the podcast to talk about this subject. So Carolyn, your email starts out, here's the first line, you guys. We all can relate to the feelings of fear and scarcity around toilet paper right now. What if I run out? What if I can't get more? I'm sure all of us have thought that these days. And it spoke to me in a very present and heartfelt way right now about what we're all dealing with. You guys, if you want, this is available on Carolyn's blog at moneyempowermentproject.com. And you can go find this there. And we'll give you some other resources at the end of the video in regards to Carolyn and some things she's got to help you as well. So Carolyn, tell me about how toilet paper is like money, because this was quite a captivating way to start your email.
Well, so thanks again for having me. And this idea about toilet paper, what's so interesting is that I had written about a lot of these concepts in my book. And I'm so glad I had published it a couple of months before this all came about, because it had helped me really formulate in my head how to communicate these big concepts into real stories, because I see people and their money interact all the time. And I am a big storyteller. So I love to show people in real life how this plays out. And my book is called The Land of Plenty. And it focuses a lot around how there really is plenty. And I think so many times as entrepreneurs, we think that there's never enough. And I think our society always feels like there's never enough, whether it's there's not enough money, there's not enough leads, there's not enough, anything. There's just this scarcity mentality in our society. And what this virus has done is that it's just exploded that idea. And as I was watching this all unfold, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, this idea of money is so much like toilet paper. Because what's happening is these people are going into the grocery store and they're like, oh my gosh, if I can't get more, that means I need to hurry up and grab it all and hold it close to me so that it doesn't disappear. And it's so much like how we react to money, especially in times right now. I've had so many conversations with my clients about that fear of, even though I have money coming in from my clients right now, it might not be that way in a couple of months. So we're living in that future fear instead of right now in the present. And so people are going into the grocery stores and grabbing the toilet paper off their shelves. But here's the interesting thing. There is no less toilet paper in the world right now than there was a month ago. The only difference is that toilet paper is now sitting in somebody's storage shelf or, storage room And there's, I hate to be crass, but there's no more need for toilet paper. Like there's no more butts in this universe right now that need the toilet paper. So the need hasn't changed either. But what has changed is where that toilet paper is sitting. And I felt it too. When I walked into the grocery store and saw those empty shelves, I started to panic. Like we all feel that fear, and it's okay to feel that. But I think it's also very comforting to realize that at some point, this scarcity around toilet paper is going to catch up. The people who have 250 rolls sitting in their storage room are going to eventually not need to go to the store to get more, and they're going to use it up. It's just that it's shifted. And so a lot of those same concepts, if you can take the idea of money and think of it just like the toilet paper, all of a sudden you realize that the money hasn't disappeared either. People still need your services. People still need what you have to offer. It's just shifted. And the other piece about this is that when people tend to hoard, and you think about people hoarding money, I hate to say it that way, but that's kind of what happens when you stop spending because you're afraid there's not going to be more. It's like you hoard that money just to be safe, just because it makes you feel secure. But then what that does is it stops that natural flow of our economy. And that's basically what's happened, is that there's just this temporary pause in people spending money.
So thank you. I really had never considered the comparison of toilet paper and money, but it is extremely relevant these days, and certainly something that I've personally felt. And one of my businesses is an event and wine school. We do events, classes, tours, and obviously everything of that is shut down. So it is to me like suddenly there is this dearth, there is this empty void where a stream of income used to come in, which is terrifying. In fact, I'd like to hear about when were you most scared? Because I was the most scared I've ever been in my life. And going back to my family story, I'm divorced, and I have previously had 2 husbands. And again, my story was the men take care of the women. I'm facing this alone, and I've never faced anything like this alone. It started on one day when I had an employee who is an amazing, amazing person and someone who's helped me scale my business. She called me and said, I have to go find another job because you can't pay me anymore. I know, because I see your books, because she does my books. Carolyn watches over, and she said, I know this isn't going to recover for a long time in terms of what you currently have going on. And so that was the beginning of my day. And then I was working on another company, and I was talking to marketing companies that were trying to help me and telling me to spend money. I needed to spend money to make money. And yet the making of money right now is so seemingly haphazard and random that nothing was assured that I could make money if I spent this investment in the marketing. There was no guarantee that it's a gift company, and you'll hear an ad later on this podcast from the company. It's called Uplift Gift, but I'm not necessarily in a world to be buying other people gifts right now. So I was going into my own cocoon of scarcity and worry. And that night, I got myself into a swirl of fear and anger and dismay. And I decided I needed to buy a gun. And I was going to protect my family because I needed to protect our food supply, because I didn't know if I'd have money to get the more food in. And I found myself the next morning, I'm not kidding you, driving to a Sportsman's Warehouse to buy a gun. And thank God the universe delivered to me a friend who had texted me that morning saying, how are you doing? And I wrote back and said, I can't talk right now. I'll call you from my car. And I called her, and luckily this woman had grown up around guns. She gave me some amazing advice about inexperienced people and the problems with guns. And she said, well, what about the alternatives? And Carolyn, you know that fear is such a huge motivator, and it's such a powerful thing in humans. I had not even considered an alternative. I knew of one thing that would protect my family from other people getting our food. And therefore, that was where I went. And I didn't get online and surf alternatives to guns. Like, I've never even wanted a gun, and that's where I went. And luckily, this woman said, well, there's bear spray. You can use really bright flashing lights in people's eyes. The bear spray really is very calming to me. And I ended up buying bear spray and a flashlight. And I feel fine now because I didn't want to hurt anybody. I didn't want to believe that about humanity too. I didn't want to have a gun in my house. But I know that these kinds of things, these fear-based bubble up, teeter on the edge every day of, if I let this get me, I will go by. Like, this is horrible that it ever came into my life. What about you? What's your fear story about all this?
Oh man. So I have felt fear, not just for myself, but for all of my clients, because I am a little bit more than a bookkeeper. I really hold space for people and their money. And I'm really a money healer, is what I've really come to realize over the past year or so. As I was getting all of these emails and calls from clients, I get that fear. I would say the first time I felt the fear was, I also do events, not a huge portion of my business, but I also do events. And I had 2 of my events cancel within 2 days of each other. And even though it's not a huge portion of my business, it's like, oh, wow, this is getting real. And then within about 3 or 4 days, I had one of my clients owns a concert venue and they had to shut down immediately. And what's been really interesting is to watch some of the companies that I thought were the most solid out of all of my clients. I have that intimate relationship with people's money, and I get to see not just how people show up in the world and seem like they're successful. I get to see really what's in their bank account. So I kind of have a feeling of who has the best chance of survival in this new reality of ours. And the ones that I would have suspected 3 weeks ago would have been the most successful aren't necessarily in that boat because of the type of business that they have. So the events industry that's hit the hardest, just like your business with doing tours and wine education classes, like that's just gone. And so I've seen all of these businesses that on the surface have been very, very successful. Not even on the surface. I mean, they are successful, just wither away to nothing within a matter of 10 days. That part to me is just like, oh man, talk about the fear. And I've been on this front line of fear, almost like how, I don't want to diminish the healthcare workers because they truly are on the front line, but that's kind of what it feels like, is that I am on the front line of people's fear with their money. And it's intense. But, and I don't know that I have the answers. I don't know that anybody really has the answers about it, other than it's okay to feel what you're feeling. This is real. Those fears are real. But I do know that if you can shift how you're looking at your fear and recognizing it for what it is, like I was saying, how a lot of times we're living in the future of what if this happens, where I am right now, what can I do right now to understand why I'm feeling this way? It makes a big difference.
Will you help us with some of your biggest tools that you shared?
Yeah.
And just take us through those big hits that you can help us with so that we can, all of us are feeling fear in one way or another, whether it's fear for the health of a child, a grandparent. I mean, I just had a Facebook post that's just one of my friends, both of her grandparents died yesterday within 24 hours of each other. And so it's just everybody's there. So if you'll start with, how do we start repairing this, or how, not maybe repairing, but how do we start shifting to something else like hope?
So one of the key things, I have to give a little confession here, and this is in my email and my blog post as well, but money talks to me. And I know some of you might roll your eyes and think, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I know Kirsten has talked about how, part of this is listening to the universe and listening to what the universe has to say. And right after I published my book, I had talked in my introduction to my book about how the book came about. And a lot of that was that I was going on a walk every day and listening to what the universe had to say to me about money. And then I'd come home and write it down. And, it all ended up in my book. And about a week or so after I published the book, I came across another woman's book called Love Money, Money Loves You. And this woman had been doing this exercise where you ask money, what do you have to say to me? And then she'd journal about it. Well, apparently money had a lot to say to her because she channeled 69 chapters. It's a fantastic book. It has very interesting concepts. Highly recommend the book. But what was so amazing to me is that within about, 5 pages, my jaw just dropped because this was the same voice that had been talking to me. And I realized that money had been talking to me this whole time. And it probably has been for years. I just didn't know that's who it was. So knowing that, as all of this was unfolding, I realized that I have this gift. And so I was like, okay, money, what do you have to say right now? Because I know that we are on the verge of something very big. And all of this is unfolding for very divine reasons. Even though we're all sitting in this incredible amount of fear, I really believe that this is a change that our society needs for a lot of reasons. And so I'm going to share a few of those things that money said to me, if that's okay.
That's perfect. That's what I need to hear.
So the one thing that came through right away was that this is the time for healing. This is really the change that we've been asking for in a lot of ways. And all that's untrue is going to fall away. The other thing that really was very profound to me, and I talk about this a little bit in my book, but where greed comes from, because greed really is a form of fear. Just like those people are hoarding the toilet paper, it's also out of fear that people tend to have greed. And so some of this is happening to break down that system that really empowers people to be greedy. And it's not to say that you're wrong for being greedy. Greedy comes from that emotion of fear. But this situation is really helping to amplify so that we can all see the truth about money. And then I asked money, okay, so if somebody's going to be reading this email, what do you want them to know right now? And I got this message that I think I need to reiterate in this podcast right now. Stay calm, breathe, it will all fall into place. And I think it's so important for us to just breathe. Take a second and breathe.
Say it again.
Stay calm, breathe, it will all fall into place.
Great.
The traditional way of making money is going to come to a close, and that's okay. Things are shifting, and it is scary when you don't know what's going to happen, but something new, and I believe something better, is going to come along. I really do. The other thing, and this is just my own, this is not money talking, but just from what I know, what really helps is taking baby steps. You just have to do a tiny, tiny little bit. It doesn't have to be that you have to solve the world's problems or your own problems all in 1 minute. You have to make those decisions about how you're going to invest your money, or should I pull out of my retirement account, or should I stop paying my mortgage, or all of those huge questions that everybody's dealing with right now. Take it in baby steps. It really, really helps. And just because you make one decision right now doesn't mean you have to stick with that decision a week from now or a month from now.
So when you're saying take baby steps, what has helped me, in addition to reading your email, is finding a way to just, and I would say this is my way of baby steps, and maybe that's what you're talking about, but like finding hope, a little bit of hope. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just a little step into hope allows me to see just a little light And I'm used to, I mean, this is not my normal way of dealing in the world. I'm usually like extremely optimistic, and I'm always open to new fun things and figuring like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And the time frame for things has just snugged up. Where I used to feel like there was time to call my dad, time to whatever, it's everything is snugged up. And so as my perspective on everything has gotten so tight, and you realize now that whatever, like you're saying, a week from now, everything might be different. So what I've been doing is taking baby steps into hopeful ideas and hopeful things in my life. And it's added some joy. Is it Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra? Someone said you can't simultaneously have hope and fear. So at least my baby step is for a little bit each day, I am building hope. And then the next day I'm building maybe this much hope. And then the next day I'm trying to build this much. And then I'll drop back down and be scared. And then I'm building another couple. So are those the baby steps you're talking about? Or are there other ways that you are recommending? What are you saying?
Yeah, I think that's a great start. The other thing that I really love to think about is, and this actually came from my conversation with money, is to be of service. And that can be paid or not paid, because people need service, right? So you may have a service that somebody needs, because as money is trying to figure out what it looks like in this new economy, the need for people to exchange services hasn't gone away. And so the more you can be of service and really be of a contribution to what this new way of doing business looks like, the more that you're going to step away from that fear. Because if you realize that you have value by giving that service, that fear goes away, because you're like, oh yeah, people have a need for those things that I'm offering. The other tip is to be compassionate. Be compassionate to yourself, be compassionate to others. What I've really made an effort to do, I actually have a notebook where I am making note of things that I see that inspire me. So I had one of my clients, their manager set up a fund, like a GoFundMe on Facebook, for the part-time employees that they had to lay off. And it was like the best part of my week, because she came up with this idea that rather than, hey, buy me a birthday gift, put in this fund, I'm going to give that money to our staff who we can't employ right now. I also have a client who bought gift cards from a bunch of local businesses that he's giving away. I mean, and even like the musicians that are doing the free concerts on Instagram. Like, I'm just taking note of all those places, and every single one of those are examples of how people are being of service. And that to me is what gives me that hope that you're talking about. And so if we can stay in that lane of seeing where the compassion lies, it helps us get through to the other side.
Thank you very much. We have been talking about hope and fear and money and toilet paper today, if you're just joining us. We've gotten some perspectives from Carolynn, who wrote a book, The Land of Plenty. She has a company called the Money Empowerment Project, and that's at themoneyempowermentproject.com. And Carolynn, I know that you have other resources for people who are listening. So we're about to go into the wine section for those of you who are waiting to hear about a wine I'm going to pair to this. And Carolynn, if you'll give us some resources that you've got, or how we can be involved or learn more from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a free chapter of my book on my website. So if you go to moneyempowermentproject.com, there is a Land of Plenty page, and there you can download chapter 8. And what's interesting is I actually put chapter 8 up probably about a month or so ago. No idea that this was going to happen. But chapter 8 is kind of more of the spiritual aspects of money, and some of those tips about things like, we believe money is infinite, and how we can participate in micro communities where we support each other. And they're all so valuable. All of these tips are so valuable and so timely right now. So go ahead and download that if you're interested. Of course, there's a link to purchase the book if you want to read it in its entirety, but chapter 8 is a great place to start right now. And then I also have the email that Kirsten has been referring to is actually up on my blog as well. So you can read that email as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. Stay on the call, obviously, because we're going to talk about wine. And I know that you like wine as much as I do. Well, maybe not as much as I do. I don't know.
It's close.
So stay tuned, you guys. And we're going to be back with an interesting category of wine that actually spans many brands, and to me will tie all of this together into a glass of red or white that you may be interested in drinking on your next masked up, gloved up trip to the liquor store. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned to hear what type of wine Kirsten will pair with this story right after this.
Today's podcast is brought to you by my company, Uplift Gift, when words aren't enough. When I had cancer, friends sent me the most amazing, wonderful gifts and cards, and they were from their hearts, and they made me feel so comforted and loved. And at the time, I was writing a column for the Huffington Post on wine pairings called Wines to Pair with Life. And so I wrote a series of articles about wines to pair with breast cancer. So in the public, purview, people started contacting me saying, what should I send my friends? What were the best gifts when someone gets bad news? And finally, I just heard, this message that said, this is what you need to do, Kirsten. This is your gift out of your cancer that you can give the rest of the world. So the company, again, is Uplift Gift. And we help you support your friends and loved ones who may be far away from you, who just are getting a divorce or are dealing with a parent dying or are struggling with a new diagnosis. I realized people need help talking to others who've been given bad news. Since I've been through that experience quite a few times in my life, I feel like the Uplift Gift series of gift boxes are a perfect fit to help you support your friends. Uplift Gift, when words aren't enough.
Next up, Kirsten's choice for a wine to open after the show.
Hi, guys. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I have with me today from San Diego, I'm in Park City, Utah, I have Carolynn Bottino. She is a bookkeeper that has hundreds of clients. She's got a staff of people that help her with that. And she's written a book called The Land of Plenty. And she has been writing about how we can get to the core of our money stories that we tell ourselves. And she has some tips for us. And so I'm going to ask Carolynn to remind us here in a brief way about what those tips are. And then we'll start into the wine that I've paired to this.
Sure. So we've touched on how money is like toilet paper, and you laugh, but it's true because money has not disappeared. Neither has the toilet paper. The toilet paper is just sitting in somebody's storage closet right now. We've also touched on the fear around money and really being on the front line of money and what that looks like. And we also talked about how money talks to me and what money had to say. And some of that is now's the time for healing. Be compassionate, look for those stories that are inspiring and show compassion, and to take baby steps when we're talking about working around our money right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So those baby steps that I take all lead me closer to, we were talking about hope as well, getting some hope built back into the day. I feel a little bit, now that I just said it that way, like, you know how you got serotonin, the happy stuff in your brain. And if you've gone through a lot of hits and hits and hits and hits, oftentimes you'll just have lost that supply of serotonin, and you need a little something to come in, a little pill to come in or whatever to come into your life to help build that serotonin back up so that you've got a reservoir that you can use again. And I feel like that's my hope just crashed out of me. I was like in a hole without any hope for a while. And with your tools and with these baby steps, I'm building it slightly back up each day so that again, I'll have some reservoir to not just, I mean, these days I can break into tears at a given moment. And so I know I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. So this hope is a key part of what you've been delivering to me. So I'm pairing today's podcast about how money is like toilet paper to the Hope Family Winery. And this winery has been in Paso Robles, California for 30 years. This family moved to Paso Robles 30 years ago, and they planted apples and some grapes. They were like, in the middle of nowhere at that point. And they now cultivate all sorts of vineyards under their family name. And they mostly participate in what we see as in the wine world as the Rhone varietals. So this is Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre. These are mostly grapes these are grapes that originated in the Rhone region of France. And what happened a long time ago is the Tablas Creek, the vintner in Tablas Creek decided to go over to Europe and bring back some of these actual Rhone varietals and planted them in the Paso Robles area. And key to this, he opened a nursery so people in the area could buy babies of these vines that he brought over. This was in the 70s. And these varietals started doing just beautifully. And so there became this group of people in the area that they started to be known as the Rhone Rangers, because they were planting Rhone varietals in California. And the Hope family does a lot of these varietals. And their family wines produce these labels, and I'm sure one of these, if not more, will be familiar to you. Liberty School, Triana, Quest, Austin Hope, and Troublemaker. So they have a great variety of wines that they put out. And today we're going to be talking about two of their wines right after we hear one more little word from our sponsor.
Next up, Kirsten's choice for a wine to open after the show.
And thanks again to our sponsor, Uplift Gift, for taking care of us today on this podcast. So the wines that I'm pairing today to the story of fear and toilet paper and money and turning it into a smidgen of hope, and that let's hope that grows. Let's hope the hope grows. We're pairing it to the Hope Family Wines out of Paso Robles, California. And there are two wines that I selected today to pair. These are two of my favorite wines. I don't happen to have them in the house, but after reading again about them this morning, they are on my list for the next time I suit up and go to the liquor store. One is called Triana Blanc. So Triana Blanc is out of the Central Coast, and it is a $25 white blend. Beautiful label with lots of, it looks like almost a carving in a church on one of those beautiful, not like a stainless window, but more like a door that's just got a beautiful carving on it. So they talk about pineapple, guava, and mandarin orange. Hello on the aroma on this wine. Amazing. And then the Viognier in the wine adds some floral notes of honeysuckle and citrus blossom. This is a wine that is 45% Viognier, 45% Marsanne, and 10% Roussanne. All of these are Rhone varietals. And on the palate, the winemaker describes this as a blend of tropical citrus and stone fruits that are softened by creamy vanilla, clove, and nutmeg. And this wine to me is one of those wines that is just, it's got a great kick of acid in it. And it is a food-friendly wine, and it is also one that I can drink without food. So it's just a fabulous wine. It's 100% Central Coast grapes. And 80% of this wine was barrel fermented. So it's going to have that vanilla and clove and that, but then 20% is vinified in stainless steel. So it means then that it's got that high acid. It's not been softened by the oak. It's not got that vanilla. So it's got that kick of acid that we all want, just like a good lemonade, where if it's too sweet, it's just kind of sappy and kind of not innocuous. It doesn't have a good presence in your mouth, where if you've got a good kick of that lemon, it's just that perfect yin and yang in your mouth. And this wine is that for me. $25, you guys. Okay. On to the red that I would pair out of the Hope family wine portfolio of brands. And that is a standby Liberty School Cabernet. It is appellated as Paso Robles, so it's right out of their vineyards, right in Paso Robles. It's a fabulous Cabernet, and the price is going to freak you out. It's $16 a bottle. It is ridiculously inexpensive for the value that you get and the taste that you get out of this wine. Again, I don't have one in the house, so I haven't tasted this in a bit, but they do use French and American oak on these. They're Liberty School, and they talk about the aromas being warm vanilla, fresh currants, and lightly toasted oak. Oh, just sounds amazing. And then on the palate, approachable tannins. So these aren't going to be like super big tannins that grip your mouth up and feel like you've got a cat's tongue. This is just going to be kind of softer. And then dark fruit herbs that they come a lot out of the ground there in Paso Robles, and really good acidity with a little bit of that wood finish. So this family, they have the higher end brands that if you want to look, if you want to spend more than the Liberty School cab, they've got higher end cabs in the Liberty School line. And then the Austin Hope is one of their premier titles. And you can look for that in the store, their brands. So that is our pairing. We have Austin Hope family wines, and I'm pairing today, and they own the brands Liberty School, Triana, Quest, Austin Hope, and Troublemaker. And I've paired today's story of fear, money, hope, paired with their Triana Blanc, which is a Rhone blend, white blend, and their Liberty School Cab. Triana is $25 a bottle-ish nationally. Liberty School is $16. We're going to wrap this up and again say thanks to our Uplift Gift sponsor today. But Carolyn, is there anything that's come to you as you've been hearing about the wine that I paired, and anything that you're thinking as we wrap this up?
Well, I think I really want to go drink a glass of wine and celebrate how much toilet paper I have sitting in my cupboard. I don't know.
Every time it's so funny. I've never felt honored to carry this through my house before and like distribute them into the bathrooms and go like, oh, there are 2 now under the counter in that bathroom. Oh, aren't we lucky? I mean, but here we are. Well, maybe what we'll do is get on a call and enjoy a glass of these wines together at some point in the future, Carolyn. We're just wrapping this up. I've had Carolynn Bottino via Zoom, which is many of our interactions, I'm sure, as adults these days. And she's called in from San Diego, and she is an author of a book called The Land of Plenty. She has many tools for us to quash fear and bring hope into our lives, and bring service and a lot of different tips that you can look at and download and read about at her website, themoneyempowermentproject.com. So thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to Wines and Wonders with Kirsten Fox. True stories with a side of wine.